Okay, welcome to Global Wealth Optimization. So this is all about protecting your assets as you start growing your net worth, as you start growing your income and your investments. So going back to when I was 18, I started making really good money in business. I incorporated my own company. The very first thing that I did, I was in Canada, is I searched all across Canada what the best province was to base the company out of that was the lowest tax rate. And so for Canada, that was Alberta. The other benefit to Alberta is that you could incorporate the company at 18 instead of 19 in BC where I was. So at that time, I had already started thinking globally. You know, it was really just a vision for the future because I was just selling locally in BC and Canada at the time. But I called the company Globalized Marketing. And I started researching, different countries in the world using the same philosophy I used for, okay, which province in Canada is the best for tax rate? I started going outside of Canada, thinking, what's the best country for a tax rate? And I was finding that wealthy people were incorporating in places like Panama, for example, that had a 0% tax rate. And the whole process was very simple because, you just find someone online, a law firm that helped specialize in setting up global structure. And so that's the first thing, no matter what country you're in, I would encourage you to start looking outside the box and looking at what countries are the best to incorporate your foundation in. So there's a couple of things you want to look for. Number one is security, right? You want to make sure that it's protected. You want to make sure it has a solid infrastructure. And then number two is tax rate, because as you're growing your wealth and business, that's going to be your number one expense if you come from a place like me in Canada. And so I'll be sharing what I'm doing personally over this course, but I also encourage you, because it's very different for everyone, to start looking at which places would be the best fit for you. The other thing that I learned from creating global structure is having things in multiple different countries is a great way to set it up, but also having your corporations or your businesses owned by a trust fund. And the reason you want to do that is, again, it adds a layer of protection. If you were to get sued personally and you're the owner of the corporation, you do have liability there. A lot of times the corporation structure limits the liability that you'll have personally, but it is still there. Whereas in a trust, the trust owns the corporations. And so there's nothing on you personally. You're not liable for anything personally. And then you're just simply a beneficiary of the trust. And there's also tax benefits to that as well. When something happens like a capital gains tax event, the trust isn't taxed where you would be personally. So that's just a brief overview. Obviously it depends what type of business you're running, but if you're in the global internet business like we are with Forex trading that's all over the world, cryptocurrency is a global market, all those investments can be done through corporations and trusts. The next layer to that would be looking at multiple countries for residency. If you ever needed to or wanted to make a move, having multiple options is always a good idea. I do the same thing in the banking industry, always having multiple options for banking. So personally, I have multiple residencies in multiple countries, and multiple driver's license in multiple countries, multiple bank accounts in multiple countries. And like I said, the reason to do that is, number one, to protect yourself, and number two, to just optimize your wealth strategy. And anyone that's a high-level entrepreneur or investor has gone through that road, that journey. The biggest names like Apple, for example, they have structure out in Ireland because of the tax rate. There's a lot of companies at the top that do this, and that's why you always hear the masses screaming at to tax the rich. The rich aren't taxed enough. And that's not really the case. The case is that the tax code is written for entrepreneurs and investors to incentivize them to grow the economies of the countries, and they're simply just playing by the tax code rules. So it's just an ignorant thing to say when you're upset that rich people aren't getting taxed. It's just ignorant because you lack the information, and that's what this course is all about, is to educate you to be able to play by the same rules, because at the end of the day, we're all on the same level playing field. We're all humans, and we all have these basic rights to set up things properly. I grew up from a lower middle class income house. It was all about becoming an employee, going to school, getting a good job, and working your way up in a company. And then my rebellious act to that was, well, what about if I just start the company? And I realized that even at the age of 18, it was very simple to do. It only cost me a few $100s to go incorporate, the company out of Canada, in Alberta. And immediately when I did that, my tax rate went down in half, just because I wasn't doing it through a personal name. I was doing my income through a corporation. So that's something to think about. Again, I'll go deeper into it over this course, but that's a brief overview.